Today on the Gripe Session podcast, we welcome former New York Met pitcher and Brooklyn Zone, Nelson Figueroa.
It's Gripe Session time with your host, George Wanaka.
It's about nothing.
Discussing everything from real estate, current events, a little bit of everything, and the annoying little things that just tick you off.
You can't handle the truth.
What? You didn't know?
Here's your host, George Wanaka.
Your ass better call somebody.
What's up, everybody? How are we doing today? Welcome to today's edition of the Gripe Session podcast. I am your host. My name is George Wanaka, and as been going on for the last couple of weeks, we're still in the midst of this pandemic, this coronavirus pandemic, and it's such a bad thing. And part of the reason it's bad is there's no sports, ladies and gentlemen. And if you're a sports fan like I am, sports is our getaway from our everyday lives. And the only thing I could think to do over the next couple of weeks is to try to give you some form of sports to bring us back to some form of normalcy. So today I had a conversation with my friend from Mets Fantasy Camp, Nelson Figueroa, who also has his own podcast, which we'll get into a little bit today. And without any further ado, here's Figgy. So good afternoon, everybody. Well, it's an afternoon here. We're here with Nelson Figueroa, former New York Mets pitcher. What's happening, Nelson? How are you today?
I'm doing well, brother. How are you?
I'm doing as best as can be expected without baseball. That's the worst part, because there's only so many reruns you can watch, and only so many things when you know the end of what's going to happen at the end of the game, where it actually cares anymore. But so give everybody a little bit of a synopsis on your career, how you started, that sort of thing.
How long's the show?
As long as we make it, but I can edit it. Talk as long as you want.
I'll try and do the quick version. Quick version is went to Abraham Lincoln High School, did not get drafted out of high school, was probably an afterthought out of high school, being about 5'10", 125 pounds and one eyebrow. Went on to Brandeis University, a small Division III school. You would have thought the dream would die there, but I had a phenomenal head coach in Pete Barney, who was a former major league catcher, and the best thing that I could have possibly done was converted from being a everyday utility type player, being able to play multiple positions, to just focusing on pitching. He said that he felt I had something special, and that would be my ticket to not just getting out of a Division III school, but my ticket to having a chance to play professional baseball. So I put a lot of faith in him, and it wound up working out. I got drafted by the New York Mets in the 30th round in 1995. Was steadily climbing. I was in Double-A in 1998 when I got traded over to the Diamondbacks alongside Bernard Gilkey. And then, yeah, and then 99 and 2000 with the Diamondbacks. In 2000, I made my debut in Texas, in Arlington Stadium, against Pudge Rodriguez and Palmeiro, and Chad Curtis was playing center field at that time. Luis Alicea was actually my first strikeout, my first major league strikeout, who wound up being my first base coach while I was with the Mets. But from that moment on, I was on the roller coaster of Major League and AAA for the next 11 years of my career. So I went up and down between organizations and traded from the Diamondbacks to the Phillies, to the Milwaukee Brewers, to the Pittsburgh Pirates. I had surgery in 2004. Didn't return back to the major leagues until 2008 with the New York Mets. 2008 and 9 with the Mets. 2010, I was with the Phillies and Astros. 2011, I was with the Astros, and that was my last year of being in the big leagues. 2011, wound up traveling and playing all over the world, all the while trying to get back to that major league dream from 2007 on. So I played in Taiwan. I played winter ball in Dominican Republic, Mexico, Venezuela, Puerto Rico. I played not only in Taiwan, but we played in Japan, have a win, I believe, in 6 different countries now. So I'm trying to find out if there's anybody that can top that, because most of the guys have wins, in one place for a long, long time. So just a little bit of my career. Journeyman is the I guess the low budget way of saying what I was at a major league level, but I feel like I was a guy who's a globetrotter who would go anywhere for an opportunity, and made the best of a kid who was, at one point drafted at 130 pounds and 5'11". So I got the most out of that, played for 19 years professionally, and here I am.
Cool. So talk about a little bit about, the fact that, okay, you're a journeyman. That's great. Going through those ups and downs of you make the majors and you get sent down and you make the majors, or you get moved from one team to another team and then you're trying to get back to that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What was your mentality like during those times, and what would you say was the thing that kept sticking you to say, keep at it, keep pushing, keep working, it'll work out?
Well, the little kid in me always said that this was a boys' game, right? And this is what I wanted to do since I was 5 years old. There was nothing else I'd rather do. And then when you had the opportunity to list that as your occupation, baseball player, writing that down for your occupation is one of the coolest things on earth. But for me, it was, I don't know, I think it was proving that first time wasn't a fluke.
Okay.
Proving that getting drafted wasn't a fluke. For me, it was always constantly about proving people wrong. That if I was given the opportunity, that I could compete at the highest level, which is Major League Baseball. And I was very blessed to, I think in the beginning, I was hard-headed. I was brash. I was a kid from Brooklyn who I wore my emotions on my sleeve. And when you get told that, hey, you're going down or you're going to the bullpen, first thing in your mind is, this is BS. I don't understand. There's a lot of things that are outside of your control, and you don't know that when you're first coming up. You don't have any clue about service time. You have no clue about who else is on a contract that is expiring and they need to see from the minor leagues just to see if they're going to cut him and bring you back. You don't know all these things, but all you're really concerned about is why me? Why me? So I got over that real quick. I got over the why me because I realized that I had a pitching coach early on in AAA with the Diamondbacks. And he said to me, it's not happening right now with the Diamondbacks, but there's 29 other teams that are watching you pitch, and your name keeps coming up on the leaderboard for a reason. So keep pitching that way. Keep pitching with that chip on your shoulder, because one of these teams is going to want you even more than we want you. He's like, one of these teams, the first trade is when somebody wants you. The second trade is when somebody needs you. That's what he told me. And so that's what I was always hoping for. And then I went in the Kurt Schilling deal over to Philadelphia, and I thought, whoa, okay, this is it. I just went in the Kurt Schilling deal, but it was a 4-for-1. The other 3 guys went right to the big leagues, and I stayed in the minor leagues to finish out the season. But I still think that I got an opportunity based on that. And I learned throughout the years that the cup of coffee kind of would have been nice, and you could have said, hey, I made it to the major leagues. But to get 12 different cups of coffee, that's actually even more special, because the ability to bounce back, even though you got knocked down, is really what I had strived for.
It's interesting to me because I always tell people every once in a while that I have that quote unquote chip on my shoulder when people tell me I can't do something, and I want to break my rear ends to show them, hey, you're wrong. I can absolutely do that. And I've interviewed Tank. I've interviewed All Time. I've interviewed and had this conversation with a lot of different people, and it's amazing how the story is a little bit different, but a lot of the stories are very, very similar, like with having that chip on your shoulder. Like one of the questions I asked All Time a couple of podcasts ago was, how did you stay ready all the time and when you're not getting looks, right? Like my son, wasn't getting looks and wasn't getting at bats. And, I said, well, what could I tell my son? He said, always be ready, always take extra hitting. Always have that chip on your shoulder, like you need to put me in here, and kind of go from there. And I was just so pissed off that I wanted to start just as much as anybody else, but I was using that. So it's kind of amazing to hear. A lot of those stories are kind of right along the same whether it be different positions or not. So
Yeah, what's crazy with that is that we Tank, Todd Pratt, myself, Lenny Harris, we were all teammates, not with the Mets, but in different times. I was with Lenny in Milwaukee. I got to see how he went about his business. I was with Tank in Philadelphia, and he was one of my favorite catchers to throw to because he was just so assertive and he had such good command and rapport with with the umpires that you felt like you could get a little bit, a little bit more inside and outside. He was just great with calling a game and commanding a game. So those guys, and I would be sure that they would not be insulted by this. We used to have a phrase, and Lenny often coined it, the B squad. And we've got spring training, and there's the A team, and then there's the B squad. The B squad are the road warriors. The B squad are the guys that go and travel. Whenever there's a road trip, hey, here comes the B squad. What does the B squad have to do? We got to show that if we're the worst of our team, we're still better than your A team. And we'd show up into places and we'd play against the starting lineups and we'd try to kick their ass and show that, man, the Mets have that kind of depth, or this team has that kind of depth. And that's really impressive. So that's kind of the mentality that you have to have, because you can't control, when you get the opportunity. But when you get that opportunity, you got to make the most of it.
Yeah, grab it with two hands and not let it go and just say, hey, this is, this kind of what happens. So
for sure.
That's good stuff. So what's your opinion with all of the stuff going on right now, and where do you think baseball is headed? Do you think we're going to see baseball this year? And if so, I think I asked Todd Pratt this last week, do you think it's going to be with full stadiums, with no people in stadiums? Where do you think the game is headed, at least for this year?
Well, I think for this year it will be modified in some sort, and I think we will be playing. I honestly do. In my heart of hearts, I feel like we're going to be playing, and I feel like a July 4th kind of opening day would be very inspirational, as long as that curve is flattened enough that we feel like that can be something plausible. I think players are, of course, concerned and about testing and staying, being able to stay in shape that long. They've been at home and playing catch and all that, those different things. But I think once we get to the point of if June 1st, say they're allowing teams to kind of congregate again and work out and play or practice to get ready for a July opening day, I think it's very feasible at this point. I think if you look at what happened over in China and Korea, Taiwan is even playing baseball right now. And they're playing with the cardboard cutouts and the robots in the stands, and the poor mascot is running up and down high-fiving cardboard cutouts. But it's still where you're sitting at home, you have a chance to watch baseball, you have a chance to root for your team, you have a chance to not think about what's going on in the world for even if it's just 3 hours, 4 hours most of the time. That's something that's really important to people as well. And I think you see President Trump is trying to have another task force when it comes to the economy, but also part of the economy is to have sports, and sports for two of the sports, you're looking at playoffs, and it doesn't even seem, that doesn't even seem as important to us as, baseball's opening day.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So that to me is where it can be very symbolic. It can be very encouraging, the same way that we came back from 9/11 and baseball was in the forefront and help to ease that pain. I think that's something that we're looking forward to. And while it's not the most important thing right now, I still think it's something that will inspire a lot of people and give hope that we're going to have a chance to see our players out there and playing in games this year.
I know that recently they came out with a story about everybody being down in Arizona, and not really having any home games, with the exception of obviously Arizona. What do you think that's more of a possibility of happening first and then it filtering out to stadiums? Or if you had to guess?
If I had to guess, Arizona has newer complexes, newer stadiums, most of the teams that were down in Florida moved out to Arizona for that reason. Most of the teams that are on the West Coast moved out over there for that reason. There's more teams in spring training out there. The complexes are normally split. So like you have the Kansas City Royals and the Reds having a complex. You have The Diamondbacks and Colorado Rockies share a complex. So all these teams usually share a complex already. So I don't know how feasible it would be to have a third team in there, where it would kind of have to be like one team has the day off, the other two teams are going to play against each other or play against other opponents, but that's how you're going to have to work it. It's going to be a huge logistical nightmare. So that's why I think if you can kind of wait it out a little bit longer and put people back in their own spring training facilities, it might be a little bit easier then. And listen, practice reps are practice reps, right? Do you really care who it's against at this point? You just want to see these guys getting out there, and you want to see these guys getting into shape and getting ready for a season. And, how short of a season it may be, how, whatever they do with the playoff system, that's left to be determined. But I think the most important thing is that if we can say that, that as far as health-wise, that we have a better grasp of this thing, then everything else will fall in place.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, I know a lot of people have been talking about what they've been doing during this pandemic, right? Who's getting stuff done around the house, like me? Who started their workout programs, like me? Who's getting all those honey-do lists knocked off? What's Nelson Figueroa doing during all of this time off?
Oof.
Outside of getting on your wife's nerves.
Yeah. Besides that, listen,
I'm doing that too.
I've been playing way too many hours of Call of Duty, Madden, and MLB The Show.
Okay.
Anytime that everybody else in the house is asleep, if I hear a snoring going on, I turn the game right on. I play something. It's really been just a weird vibe because you can't do much outside of the house, right? You can't go anywhere. So other than I know my grocery store inside and out right now. I can tell you where everything is on which aisle at this point because I've been shopping so many times. Masks and gloves and the whole 9 yards. But I think it's cooking a lot more. I'm learning new recipes, just trying to mix it up so you're not eating the same thing all the time.
Nelson's becoming domesticated? Is that what you're saying?
You know what? Nelson's had to be domesticated. When you play baseball and your family is gone more than half the time, and even when you're at home, you're on the road when you don't live there. So that to me was always where, hey, I got to come up with a way to make some quick, easy meals. Like if it was nowadays, I'd be meal prepping like an animal, have everything ready where I could just, take it out the freezer and get it ready or the refrigerator and have it ready for the next day. I think that's something that's changed in the game is the way that people eat, right? The way that ball players eat. We're looking at food allergies being recognized. We're looking at, it's no longer looking for a powdered supplement. It's more about eating, lean pieces of grass-fed meat instead of trying to avoiding chemicals and things like that. So I think we've gotten smarter throughout the years, and organizations have gotten smarter and realized that they're trying to put good value into the money that they're investing into these players. And so instead of having, cold cuts or bring in, $250 worth of McDonald's for guys to eat before batting practice, if you could have someone prepare 4 or 5 different meals and have that for that same money, and it'd be a lot better for the players. So I think those are along the lines of where I'm at right now. It's just a lot of time on my hands with the podcast. So I have the Amazing But True podcast.
I was just going to say, absolutely. Plug the podcast. Tell everybody a little bit more about it.
So it started out in mid-March, and, we were planning on having a preseason show and then the opening day show, and then all that was gone right away. But we've been able to fill some time with A-list of guests on our show. And, we start talking about current events, but to get back into some of their careers and thought process and where they've come from and all these different things. And I think when you start out with Edgardo Alfonso, day one, week 2 was
Mike?
Mike was week 3.
Okay.
So we had Alfonso, John Franco. Because that was right when the shutdown happened and there was no baseball for sure. We talked to Franco about, kind of correlating it to 9/11 when it was a shutdown and no baseball. So we talked to him about 9/11. Then we were able to get Mike Piazza for week 3, which followed up kind of on Franco teeing up, everything that happened with 9/11. Mike was phenomenal talking about things going on in Italy that we didn't know about, and what he's been up to lately. After that, we actually had Jim Brewer, super fan Jim Brewer, come on. And, when you talk about comic relief and to get away from things for just a moment, he's one of the guys that you look to make you smile. So Jim Brewer was phenomenal. Then week 5, we had Stephen Matz with all the phenomenal work that he's been doing with COVID-19, with the masks and taking care of first responders. He's really stepped up in a major way. We lost Rusty Staub last year. And being able to have someone, kind of take that mantle or try to hold that torch. So what he was able to do with the first responders, Stephen Matz has really stepped up in a big way. So I commend him for that. He was on the show last week. And then this week, of course, we paid tribute to Anthony Causey, the sports photographer with the New York Post, longtime sports photographer who's known by all. All 4 major sports here in New York. Seen him on the sidelines, and he's taken some of the most captivating pictures in sports history, especially in the New York market. And then in that, we also had Howie Rose talking about his introduction into Twitter, I should say, and what a thirst trap is. So that's a funny part of the interview. And then we had this phenomenal, I keep using phenomenal, we had this, I want to say one of the most moving interviews that I've ever had with anyone. And, I was on SNY for years and we've interviewed a lot of people, but to have Doc Gooden kind of shed back some layers and to hear Doc Gooden respond to things with such an accountability and just kind of stand right there in front of you and say, listen, I know I was wrong. I know what I did was wrong. And it wasn't even like him asking for your forgiveness. It wasn't even, him giving excuses. Yeah. It was just like, I want to just lay this out there for all you guys to hear because I need to say this. And he kind of put it all out there, and you couldn't help but get choked up, and we know because we've interacted with him what a tremendous person he is. And he's a big kid still. He smiles, he laughs, he jokes around with everybody, no matter who you are. And he is a people person almost to a fault. And I think that's one of the things, is that he wanted to be so loved and accepted at all times. And when he wasn't able to do that, that's where he was at his weakest. That's a huge message for a lot of these kids today in this, me, instant gratification generation that we've built. So I think that was a very huge interview. So we've been doing some good things, and I'm excited, and we're going to continue to try and find ways to bring content that's a little bit different and not the same, not the same interviews, hopefully, that you've heard 100 times before. We're trying to push some people to get into their feelings a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, it's good. I've definitely listened to the podcast since you told me about it, and it's one of the ones that I hit the subscribe button to, and hopefully everybody that subscribes to this will go find that podcast, hit the subscribe button there as well.
Appreciate it.
And one of the things that I always tell people is the most important things with podcasts, or whether you're listening to my podcast or you're listening to Figgy's podcast, is not only to hit subscribe, but also to give it a rate and review. Because on this podcast, if you do that, there's a chance that I might shout you out and tell everybody that this person gave me a rate and review. So you become part of the podcast in the same breath. Now, I'm not sure if that's what Figgy and his other hosts are doing, but hey, everybody does things a little bit differently, and that's what makes this world go around. So it's all good. So I've asked, obviously, a bunch of the people that have been on this podcast so far.
Rate and review. Got it.
Look at that. See, now I'm giving you advice. So I'll send you my bill next week in the mail. So I've talked to, like I said, I've talked to Doc before. I've talked to Mookie before on this podcast, and all-time Lenny Harris and Todd Tank Pratt. Talk about, and people that have listened to this before have heard me talk about fantasy camp. And they've seen me post on fantasy camp, much to my detriment this year, but we'll put that to the side. Talk to the people about your experience as a pro, because I've talked to it till the cows come home. Talk to the listeners about how the pros feel, or somebody like yourself feels coming into fantasy camp with the people that have not got to that level. what's that experience is like for you as a coach?
Oh, for me as a coach, it's nothing but it's twofold for me, right? Because I look around the room with some of my fellow coaches, and I grew up idolizing these guys. I grew up, some of these guys, have all the championships. You got the '86 team, the '73 team, you got the '69 team, and you got guys from the '99 team. I'm sorry, 2000. The guys from 2000 who went to the World Series. You got a nice eclectic mix of people, and you just watch how the fans gravitate to everyone a little bit differently, and you get to see a different side of these guys outside of the television. You're not looking at them anymore from afar. You're actually getting to shake their hand and getting to know them one-on-one. You said earlier, we talked earlier about, having this Rolodex now that includes numbers that, of these former major league players who they wouldn't have a problem with you reaching out and having a conversation. You send them a text and you get a text back.
Yeah.
We're humans, we're people too, and we enjoy the interaction. I think fantasy camp is a tremendous opportunity to live out that dream, but also in a way, you get fed a nice dose of reality. That's where I think someone like me comes into play, where I didn't have the championship caliber, Cy Young, Hall of Fame career, but at the same time, I think most people sat back and watched me pitch and said, I could do that. Said, oh, I crushed that guy, and I think when we do our pro game, and I like to dial it up a little bit, and dialing it up a little bit for me now is, getting it to 85. But if I'm able to kind of just put a little bit of realism to it, because you just spent all week long, getting 45 miles an hour, 45 mile an hour maybe strikes, because the strike zone is huge. And then all of a sudden you start seeing a guy who can put the ball on corners, make the ball move, spin the ball, change up, do all the things that we do as professionals. And you start to see like, okay, so that's what that's like. You get Turk Wendell and everything he throws cuts. And then you see, okay, now I understand why he's so hard to hit. We had Heath Bell last year, and Heath was bringing it 87, 88 miles an hour. And then he started bringing off slider. If you fouled off a pitch, he went back into pitching mode. So we get that same adrenaline rush. We get that same, wanting to prove ourselves and make sure that you guys realize how difficult it is to actually play this game. And I think you guys get a better respect. And so do we at this point in our careers. When we play that pro game, that pop up to the third baseman, and you all of a sudden can't catch it. And remember all those times that you yelled, come on, I could. No, you couldn't, okay? Because a major league guy would have hit it about 10 times as high. And it's coming down, with the sun and everything else, and it's not as easy as it looks. So there's a greater appreciation for when you go to a ball game now to see what these guys do. And that the fact that you guys play 7 games in 5 days. I take my hat off to you guys all day, every day. And you guys know that when we're down there at camp. Yeah. I try to push you guys and motivate you guys to find a way to make, the next game your best game, rather than saying, oh, that's all I got. And I think that's the fun of it, right? You go to that championship game and you get a chance to win a ring, and then you get a chance to walk on the city field and get introduced to the crowd. And Doug Dickey does an incredible job of making it an experience that it's not enough to go one time. It's not enough to go 2 times. You start thinking of ways of, hey, how can I get back? How can I hide this money from mama so that I can go back next year without her knowing?
So today, the funny thing is, today the stimulus checks hit the bank account today. And I told my wife, the stimulus thing hit the bank account today, and it was X amount of dollars. And she goes, oh, that money's good. I go, yeah, no, absolutely. I'm like, it means fantasy camp's already paid for it. That's all it means. And she didn't think that was as funny as I did.
Didn't laugh at all.
But when I started fantasy camp a couple of years ago, and I've told this a bunch of different times, is the first time I was really like a one and done type of a situation. And I said, and then I had just a phenomenal time. I'm sitting at the dinner going, how do I go back? Like it starts going in your head, like, how do I go back? And then meeting yourself, and then just the relationships that you put in, and not just with the pros. I mean, like we were talking earlier before we came on air. I have 3 or 4 different groups
Right.
of, it's called MFC, Mets Fantasy Camp. I actually now started referring to it as Mets Family Camp, because
Mm-hmm.
almost every person there becomes like an extended member of your family. Like
Mm-hmm.
camp was back in January. Some of these guys I'll talk to for the rest of the year
Mm-hmm.
through Facebook Messenger groups or text messaging groups. And
Mm-hmm.
like, you're working with my son pitching wise, and that'll happen from camp
Yep.
because it can't. So,
Yep.
the first thing when I had Todd Pratt as my coach in the first year, one of the things that I said was, I was joking around. I'm like, it's like, all right, well, give everybody the cell phone numbers and we're going to put them all in. He said, this is who this one is, this is who that is. And I'm going, I got Todd Pratt's cell phone number. I got Pete
Mm-hmm.
Sherrick's cell phone number. And like, yeah, like, what's the problem? I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, is this like the side chick phone or something like that? Like,
The burner.
like,
It's the
yeah,
burner
is
account.
this like the burner phone? Like, well, what's the, so we're going to text you in like 3 months, and like, what's going to happen? And they all laugh and they go, send a text, see what happens. Like, we won't hear from you until next year. And you're like, nope. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on, Georgie? How's things? I'm like, oh shit. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, for me, one of my biggest things was, I've been a Mets fan my whole life since I was a kid. And above my bed, I had a big Dwight Gooden poster with him throwing the ball, and behind his was like the plane, like the fuselage from the plane coming out.
Uh-huh.
And I had that there forever. And then I literally got to sit 7 feet away across the locker room from a guy that I had up on my wall. I'm like, that's just cool than anything. So if anybody has the abilities, or even if you don't have the abilities to do it, to try to get it done once, you find out what the numbers are, and you save, you scratch, you claw. I would be overselling it or not selling it enough any way I could describe it, because once you go there, you're like, how do you start trying to figure out how do you come back? So
Yeah,
Doug
one of
did
the
a
guys.
great job doing this every single year. So
Yeah,
shout
one of
out
the
to
guys
Doug.
that came down to camp. He would do it every 5th birthday, and so he'd have literally old school style a coffee can, and he would throw in, however many bucks every week. When he got paid, he'd throw in a few bucks, and he would save up for 5 years and have enough to come back for that 5th year birthday. And I thought that was a phenomenal idea, a phenomenal way to do it. And the problem that he said was his body 5 years later isn't the same as it was,
The
and he
same
doesn't
as it
realize
is.
that.
I
Yeah.
know.
So he learned the hard way that the body at 45 isn't the same as the body at 50.
No, I know that.
He wanted to try and score from second base, and I remember he got to third base and he made the turn, and I go, "Where are you going?" I go, "The ball's already back to the pitcher." He's like, "What?" Because it took me that long to get here. I said, "Yes, it did. Yes, it did."
So there's a lot of those stories that obviously go on with camp, but it's a great time. I always tell everybody, if you could do it, or even if you think it's tight, do it once just for the experience,
Yeah.
especially if you're a competitor. So anyway, so we've been on here for a little bit. So I'm going to ask you the same question I've asked everybody else that's come on.
Okay.
If Nelson Figueroa had to gripe, if he had one gripe that just sticks in the back of your thing, it's like, what the hell are these people thinking? It could be anything. It doesn't have to be baseball related, could be general public related, could be anything. What's the one thing that Nelson Figueroa gripes about or has a gripe about?
Wow, this is a George Wanaka show.
And if you say George Wanaka, that's a bigger problem. But just so you know, I'm just letting that out there.
No, I think one of the things that, I don't know so much it was a gripe. There's no regrets to my career because I think I maximized my ability. Was I given the most opportunities to do so? No, because that's just where I was at. That's the tier that I was on, where if I had 2 or 3 bad starts in a row, probably getting sent to AAA, released or traded to make room for somebody else. So I never got the opportunity to have 30 starts in a season just to see what would happen, because I would say undoubtedly that you could take 7 of those starts, and say, man, this guy's awful. But in the other 23, I gave the team a chance to win in almost every single one of them. And that's usually what you would want, right? Because when I first came up, it was to be an innings eater, a Jeff Suppan, if you will. Jeff Suppan was the model for innings eater. This guy was 220 innings. He pitched to a 4.5 ERA, which means he went 6 innings, 3 runs, a quality start, and he got paid millions and millions of dollars to do that. And I played with Jeff early on in our careers. And just to see him get that opportunity was phenomenal. He did it also in the American League with the DH. So he didn't ever have to hit. He didn't have to run bases. He didn't have to do a lot of those things. Where part of my staying in the big leagues probably was some of the skill set that I had about handling a bat, being able to bunt, being able to field my position, do some running, do whatever the team needed, because it was a total package kind of thing with me. So I would love to go back and just get 30 starts when I was in my prime and say, hey, listen, no matter what team it was. I mean, I was with some bad teams, let's be honest. I was with the Milwaukee Brewers. We lost 100 games. I was with the Pittsburgh Pirates. We lost 100 games as well. But I was never given that opportunity to just be there. I was always kind of if there was 5 starters, I was number 6. And I would be the guy first to come in whenever. Oliver Perez, I had a lot of my career thanks to Oliver Perez, because he was one of those guys that was, he'd be lights out, strikeouts. Yeah, lights out, strikeout 7. And then the next start, he'd go out there and he'd walk 7 in the first 2 innings. And then I'd be in the game. And I'd have an opportunity to show, oh, wow, this guy kept us in a ball game. He pitched 4 2/3 of scoreless ball against the same guys that just scored 6 runs off Oliver. So that helped me in a lot of ways. But I think that my gripe would be if I had that opportunity to have 30 starts, that I felt like with the not stuff that I had, but the mentality that I had of learning hitters and the ability to use 5 different pitches in the strike zone, 3 different arm angles, messing with hitters' tempos and timing. I really felt like I would have been able to put up at least one really good season that would have changed the course of my career and gotten me more of an opportunity to stick for a lot longer.
Okay, cool. Okay, I was setting you up for another one. I'm like, yeah, we ain't gonna go. We're not gonna hit that section. So,
What do you got?
No, we ain't gonna go there. But anyway, Figs, I want to thank you for coming on today. We appreciate you coming on the Gripe Session as always, and good luck, best of luck on the podcast.
Thank you,
and hope the family is doing better. I know there was some issues going on with this pandemic for you, and we talked earlier, and good to hear everybody's doing it, 100% better, which is again, nothing more than positive. There's a lot of tragic stuff that's going on nowadays. So it's good to hear that as well. And, we'll try to get you back on again later on, hopefully once baseball season starts.
Yes, indeed. Anytime, brother. Thank you so much.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Gripe Session podcast with my guest, Nelson Figueroa. I want to thank Nelson for coming on the podcast today. And hey, do me a favor, if you got some value from this podcast today, do me a favor, give me a rate and review. And also do my guest a big favor. Go on to whatever you listen to podcasts on and go find his podcast called Amazing But True. It's a really good podcast. They have some really cool guests. The first few podcasts have been just absolutely tremendous. So wish him nothing but the best on that podcast and all he's got going on now. So just want to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, to stay safe out there. Make sure you're doing your social distancing as we're all supposed to be doing right now. We might have another special guest on the next edition of the Gripe Session. There's a very good possibility we might have Mr. Turk Wendell coming on this next edition of the podcast. So we shall see. So make sure you tune in, and more importantly, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you'll automatically get this podcast downloaded directly into your podcast app. We'll see you soon. And as always, to end this podcast, always remember, do something nice for somebody you wouldn't normally do, and we'll catch you on the next edition of the Gripe Session. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to The Gripe Session. Please follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.